Everybody, hello, hello, hello. This is the part where we wait for everybody to file
Enter.
into the auditorium, file into the room where we are all together. Good to see your faces. Welcome. We are really excited to have you here. I am Gibson Fay LeBlanc, and on behalf of Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, this is our chapbook launch. For the Maine Chapbook Series and reading, and we're just so excited to do this tonight. So you should all be muted, and we'd love it if you'd stay that way, just so we don't have lots of stray noises happening. You should probably be on speaker view. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but if you want to go ahead and make sure you're on speaker view, that would be good. Let's see what else. The books for tonight, very important. There are fabulous books by Martha Collins and Adrian Blevins that you can buy by going to Bookshop and searching for Kelly's Books to Go, who is our official bookseller for the night. And also Zan's book. If you go to Kelly's Books to Go, her website, kellysbookstogo.com, and look under featured books, or the Zan's chapbook, Bright Glint Gone, will be right there waiting for you to order it and get delivered to wherever it needs to get delivered to. So we are going to jump right into it. We have three great readers tonight and poets. We will have probably some time for some questions at the end of the night. So if you have things that occur to you, you can feel free to put comments or questions in the chat, and we'll go to those as we can. I'm going to introduce our first reader, who's Adrian Blevins, who's the author of Appalachians Run Amok, winner of the 2 Sylvia's Press Wilder Prize, as well as Live from the Homesick Jamboree and the Brass Girl Brouhaha, as well as the chapbooks Bloodline and The Man Who Went Out for Cigarettes. She's also co-edited a collection of essays, Walk Till the Dogs Get Mean, Meditations on the Forbidden from Contemporary Appalachia. She is the recipient of many awards and honors, including a Kate Tufts Discovery Award and a Rona Jaffe Writers Foundation Award, and she teaches at Colby College. Welcome, Adrian, and I'm going to bring her up here. There she is.
Hey, you guys. Congratulations to Suzanne for this. I was just telling her that I just randomly, crazily, I published my first book, which was a chapbook in '96. And it was extremely exciting. And it just opened a doorway to a world that I didn't feel entitled to or ready for. And congratulations to Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance for doing this and for making a space for all these wonderful young new poets. I'm going to read, I've just found out that my next book, which is Status Pending, I've been working on these poems for about 5 years now, is going to be published by 4 Books in New York, but not until, it's been a while, I'll be able to write a lot of things until it's at the end of 2021, I think is when it's going to come out. So it's called Status Pending. They're sad little divorce poems. If you feel, when I wrote my first book, and there were some divorce poems in that book, and I would read, and people would come up to me after the reading and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, dude, it's okay. It takes a long time to get to the point where you can write a poem about a thing. You know, the thing that happened that caused the poem to be written is sort of over, so I'm okay, but they really felt sad for me. So anyway, don't feel sad. And so I'm just going to read just maybe sort of a few of those so you can get a sense. This is from the book Status Pending. This is called Coping Status. Here in the downward side of what's going on, in the blue hum and air sick glum of it, I'm not dead yet, and there's Sauvignon Blanc in the fridge, and an old shot glass and no shotgun, and it's more or less nightfall, and there's an okay bed and a good pen, and yeah, I like my ink dark as dark gunmen here in the downward side of what's going on, where there are sawflies and wild rye in a cauldron, and the wings and bones of brown creepers and wrens. Here near Massachusetts, where I came to make my home, to smell the ghosts of doomed women in my cunt, I want to say, that would be illogical and quite melodramatic and unholy, actually, to the people of the hills where I'm from, where the ladies make pies on a weekly basis and bathe in creek waters and kiss you in your truck while they read 10,000 books to get smart enough to arrive here in the downward side of what's going on, somewhere in the woods near Massachusetts, all flimsy and woeful and woozy and broke. All right, don't feel sad. Maybe what I should read, like maybe sort of 5 poems, Gibson, if they're that fast. This is Flight Status. The thing about this book is all the poems, I started writing them because I noticed that our favorite word, you've got refund status and order status and, you know, blah, 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 blah. So all the poems are named after a kind of status. So every poem has, and it's really hard to keep up with them. I can't remember which one is which. This is called Flight Status. Flight Status. Left for me the ash to heave. Left the lash and left the sieve. Left the chime and left the wren, left the rain and left the ache. Left me dragged and left me rocking. Left such leg room, he left me a crypt and blew out the stamens okay and blew out the sap until finally I got it that he leaving left even the milk our baby spilled like a veil across the decades, like he left me counting how much airspace we had to cross to get to the end of it, like he left me to say how it was to stand over so much slope, to know to be airborne, which is what I am knowing. Plus, we're all just vapor plus a bellfire, and to wake up, motherfucker, into Hewitt. Code status. But how to Hewitt, as in to axe it, and not end up too loud and or barbarous and dirtied, like a schmuck in a park in a winter of rain. How to hoist it, and it be the halt of nothing but what it's the halt of. Halt of the reign of the lag between what was and what's not. Halt of man and woman as a crock, like water under tillage over lean bluestone. And God forbid you should be unreliable as a witness. But already it thins like ghost spit in the back of the neck, like he was a blowfly in the eaves of your house. Or you were, or the 22 years like pearls on a string down a sullied drain exceedingly somehow were, and or the riffle of a leaf, and or some fog like the blur of the undo of a rub out, and or a raise of the cease of the hum of a nothing fade. 2 more poems. If I can find them. Or X status. Get little poem. Little shoelace between death and me. The fuck out of bed and tell the people how dumb marriage is. How dull and jackass. How unrife but non-stop. Tell them for love you need no kids for starters and monstrous swaths like meadows of things like horizons and moonscapes and skylines to want. And glass buildings and rope ladders, and a faraway beach, and hummocks of snow, and fields of breeze rain in the hair and on the roof, and a drawing pad like a humongous white canvas of yes, like flecks of lemon on the lips, and not, just not, the mouth like a hinge of spit, mouthing the end, holy writ, but counterfeit of it. 2 more poems. Settlement status. One of the things about teachers, the same thing with reading, guys. I want you to know you can't hear people respond because everybody's on mute. And so that's weird. I'm just making a record of that for Martha and Suzanne to note. Settlement status. 2 more. Settlement status. You take the cranberries and I'll take the mice. You take the lawnmower, you take it, and I'll take the rake. You take the good nozzle and I'll take the grass seed that I will eat while drinking the wine that I'll obviously also have to take, as well as the generator that I'll sit on and pretend is a vacuum. You take the window and I'll take the Windex. You take the light bulb and I'll take the sockets, and you can take the camera. If I can have that time when we first saw Calvary Cemetery in New York and Queens, when I was like, oh, and you were so very tragically mad in a way. And to be fair, it really was snowing hard, and on your shoulders was the drudgery, not to go too fast on worn tires, not to even mention the desire to play the guitar with me not nearby, plus the fact of how crushing life was going to be back home in Maine, where so many trees had to be marked and felled and stacked and chopped and lit and burned and scooped as ashes out, plus how many nerve-wracking shipwrecks at your work, where all of the hurt of all of the people of all of poor America sit to this very, very day all upon you, sort of snuffing you out. And so you take the headstone, baby, and I'll take the grave. One last poem. This is called Facebook Status on Why the Marriage Failed. No bareback, horses, no ottoman or island to put the feet on, not enough boodle and loot, too much bourbon and gin, not enough H2O, except in the form of ice, too much capitalism, barbarism, neutralism, escapism, stigmatism, euphemism, like a greasy lagoon down the body rind of each of us, the five of us, the five of us, the five of us. Too much homework and beef, too fast the minutes, no polecat, no jackdaw, no bullfinch, no wagtail, no linnet, too fast the hours and years. We needed a smaller bed, less empire, teepee, tinder, fire.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. Love those poems. Thank you for reading those. Great to hear new stuff, and congrats on the book.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so now it is my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Martha Collins, whose most recent book of poetry, Because What Else Could I Do?, won the Poetry Society of America's William Carlos Williams Award. She's also published 9 earlier collections of poetry, including Night Onto Night and Admit One, an American Scrapbook. She was also the Pauline Delaney Professor of Creative Writing at Oberlin for over 10 years. So Martha, welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's see, I need to do something. I need to add you. There we go, there you are.
I need to unmute me. Thank you, Gibson. Thank you, Adrian. I can't wait for that book. Those are fabulous poems. And thank you in advance, Suzanne. I'm honored to be celebrating the publication of Suzanne's wonderful chapbook and to be doing so for the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. For my few minutes with you, I'd like to wrap Suzanne's chapbook in the warm cloak of the MWPA, as I believe it's known. A warm cloak, but today a sad one too. I came to know the MWPA through my dear friend Lee Sharkey, who died just a few days ago at her home in Portland. She was one of the co-founders of MWPA and a former president. I met Lee just 10 years ago, but it seemed as if we'd been friends forever. For all those wonderful years, we traveled back and forth between Maine and Massachusetts, talking nonstop, poetry, politics, love, marriage, life. Then 2 months ago, Lee called and told me she only had 2 months to live. I came up for 2 weeks, during which time we refined the poetry manuscript she'd been working on for some time and sent it to her publisher, Jeffrey Levine at Tupelo Press. Within hours, he was asking about cover art for the book, which is called I Will Not Name It Except to Say, and which will be out next spring. Here is the last poem from that book by Lee Sharkey. Grief. A cachectic woman shuffles into the infusion center on the arm of her son. A demented man floats through the memory center in a cone of silence. If every day I worship at the altar of my grief, who is it I am true to? Father, mother, now another. I study the woman's bones and dark eye sockets and realize she's a mirror. I study my love's expression, looking to prize out what's inside. A fingertip touches my throat. We are grass in a windstorm. If someone touches my throat, if something breaks and smiles, offers the gift of tongues, if someone appears and averts the sacrifice, if someone dwells over the sick man's bed and slides into his body, if someone inscribes the commandments with a fingertip of fire, father, mother, and now another, grief is my sister and my brother. If a breeze stirs the sedge grass by the marsh, if a face arrives from the whirlwind calling itself indwelling, not through gloom, nor through sloth, nor through levity or idle chatter. If the Shekinah arrives and averts the sacrifice, if a wind with a face that speaks says, build my dwelling here, then I will remember joy. Then I will enter the sick man's body. I am a citizen of this republic. That Lee died shortly before the presidential election, of course, makes her loss all the more troubling. She was cautiously looking forward to the election results. The timing of all this has made me deeply conscious of my husband's sudden and tragic death almost exactly 4 years ago before that presidential election. His death and my grieving are the subject of my most recent book, Because What Else Could I Do? A series of poems I addressed to him in the 6 months following his death. I had no intention of publishing at the time, but in fact, they came out just a year ago. The poems are untitled, so I'll just pause briefly between the few that I'll read. I alone in a restaurant, and what is left of you at home in a plastic box on your dresser where you kept your socks and put your change. And what will I do at home in my own house? What will I do with my one spoon and my wide bed? What will I do without? This next one was written on November 8th, 2016, Election Day. The what you will never, the what you missed, the reddening map, that can't be true. The what, the climate, the send them back, the end, the public, the health, the rights, the black, the planet, the white, the how did we fail, the what can we do, the how did I fail, the nothing to do. I want you to know, I'm glad you don't know, but I want you to have been right, that maybe it will not be so bad. I want you to help me believe that maybe it won't be the end of everything. So from now on, I am going to keep you posted, which means I will have to read the papers, not just the headlines, so I can keep you informed the way you liked to be informed. But of course, I'm still glad you don't know, don't have to know. The next two poems were written in December on Cape Cod, where we scattered his ashes. Paper bag with empty box with almost empty plastic bag. And on my hands and on my jeans, you, some part or parts of you from when we sent you into the sea, low tide, so you easily rode the lightest currents in tiny explosions of white. And when we finished, a sudden late sun on the water, of which you were becoming apart on runnels between patches of sand, as if you were signing yourself in silver. Another beach, the last one we walked together, hand in hand in the August sun. And I walked on while you rested there, and now it is winter, and I am here with almost the last of you in my hand, a tiny part of some parts of you, your hand, your blue eye, shoulder, mouth. And I try to gentle you in to the sea, but a sudden wave rushes over my feet, and the wind catches this part of some parts of you. And instead you are in the air, and more than before, you are on me. You have met me again. You will not let me let you go. You are in the sea where you wanted to be, but you are also in air and sand and earth where your grandson will bury another small part. And now I lick my finger and you are in me. And with you went my summer sun, a friend or two, and who was there? And with you went the weeks to come, the months so far, my one. My body too, the one I knew as one of two, though you forgot to take desire, which now is wrapped in grief's long arms. And with you went the one I was, that was within, without, with you, mostly brave and largely true. The one I find some moments in some darkened place of joy, then lose. In your rust-colored jacket, your blue striped shirt, on your skin, on your skis in the woods, on the beach, in the surf. Your house, in winter, in spring. In your office chair, in the yard with your kids. In California, in Florence, in Rome. Your lilacs before they broke in the storm. Your face, all over now. And the last poem in the book was written when I was with Lee Sharkey. We were doing a reading in Western Massachusetts. The poem is about that. It was exactly the 6-month anniversary of my husband's death. And the poem quotes some lines I wrote to him several months before his death. And I should say that this actually happened. On the evening of the 6th-month day, I drove into the hills, a rivered town, a little cafe to read my poems to strangers and friends. And at the end, I read, "Go with me into that night where one will go before." Red moon by night, red night, night, my love, by and by. And there was silence before, they told me after. When I read go, the door opened, but no one was there. And when I read bye, the door closed. And now a few words about Suzanne. When I received the finalists for this chapbook prize, I was delighted by the poems. They confirmed what I already knew, which was that Maine was thriving poetically. But when I came to Suzanne's Bright Glint Gone, I was more than delighted, I was thrilled. Sometimes it's hard to choose a winner. This time it was easy. And having begun my reading with looking back at the past of the MWPA, I'm pleased and applauding Suzanne to be looking not only at its present, but also into its future. So before she reads, I'd like to give you a little taste of what's in store for you by reading the preface I wrote for the book. Reading through Bright Glint Gone for the first time, I was delighted by the poet's unexpected ways of perceiving the familiar, her stunning metaphors and turns of phrase, her delicate balance of humor and wisdom. The pleasure only deepens on rereading. In poem after poem, Suzanne surprises. She depicts herself as a turtle in one poem, which I believe she's going to read, as a coyote in another. The wheel of fortune has a flat tire. An ended relationship begins. He mistook me for a getaway car. And an early spring is only half out of her clothes, rolling a stocking slowly down her leg. These transformations and extended metaphors are a source of delight and even laughter, but they are conduits for more. The speaker is explicitly and often contentedly without a partner in many of the poems, reveling in the joy of keeping myself to myself. But loss and grief underlie the collection and give the poet license to offer mature and hard-earned wisdom, often in aphoristic one-liners. The voice is sure of itself, a seamless blend of colloquial familiarity and rhetorical care that will keep you alert and connected. By the final poem, you'll feel as if you've met a delightful new friend and are cheering her on as she passes through to whatever experience awaits her.
Thanks, Martha. Thank you. Thank you for reading your poems, as well as for giving us a preview of what we're about to hear from Zan. So thank you very much. So I'm going to quickly introduce Zan. Suzanne Langlois' poems have appeared in the Maine Review, Nailed Magazine, Cider Press Review, The Fourth River, Off the Coast, Rattle, and on the Button Poetry Channel. Her work has been nominated for Best of the Net, Independent Best American Poetry, and the Pushcart Prize. She holds a BA in English from Tufts and an ED.M. from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and is currently an MFA candidate at Warren Wilson. She lives in Portland and teaches high school English in Falmouth. It is my pleasure to introduce Suzanne Langlois, and there she is.
Thank you, Gibson, and thank you so much, Martha and Adrian, for your poems. Martha, for your incredibly generous preface, and Adrian, for your lovely blurb, and for being part of making this chapbook like an actual thing that exists in the world. And also to the folks at Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, both Gibson and Hannah Perry as well. I also want to thank Douglas Milliken, who, in addition to being an amazing writer, it turns out is also like a really amazing artist. That's his work. So you can see it on the cover art. And also to Pink Eraser Press for the design and publication, and to Barbara Kelly of Kelly's Books to Go for making it really easy to purchase books without Amazon. So check that out. I'm going to read half poems I'm going to read it from the chapbook, and half are poems that I've written in the years since I submitted it. So yeah, and as Martha said, I'm going to start out with Self-Portrait as a Turtle. I would invite you inside, but there's no room in here, even for me, which is why my arms, legs, head, and tail are all hanging out the windows. I do not contain multitudes. I barely contain a single-tude. I sit here like a bump on a log, but I am not a bump on a log. I'm a disembodied bump, a nomadic bump, looking for a place to rest my bone home. When I find one, I hunker down for a while, become my own bunker until I have to move again. When I do, I plod and lurch, a stiff geriatric. I am slow as tree sap, but I live a long time and I'm comfortable in mud, more comfortable than lumbering around out here anyway, looking awkward and conspicuous, and most likely not worth the effort required to get inside, at least not if the visible bits are any guide. A question I can't even answer, having never gotten far enough outside myself to actually see myself. I'd like to invite you inside just so you can describe me to myself, so I can finally know who it is I live with. But when there's space for another soul in this shell, it will be because I'm no longer here. This next one's Natural Selection. I dreamed a drone followed me around making disappointed noises. I wanted to swat it out of the air and dismember it, leaving nothing but a pile of disjointed gears. But drones may be what survives us after we can no longer survive ourselves. We are sentenced to our worst inventions, the loot, jello molds, marriage, and now metal insects. When we are baked to a crisp by our own fiddling with the thermostat, solar drones will assemble new drones. They'll take aerial photos of the wreckage we've left and make them into memes, which they'll share with one another digitally, chittering at the binary captions. From above, the farmland will look like the blackened tiles of a burned temple. The irrigation ponds, pennies at the bottom of a well gone dry. For now, though, they hover above us, obedient, obsequious, showing us only what we ask to be shown. This next one is called Haunted. Yeah. There are 3 ghosts outside my window. Maple trees I voted to remove to make more room for the cars in the parking lot. True story, they were right over there. 5 humans could not agree on the borders between their parking territories. And since the trees could not vote on the matter, the trees are gone, just like that. And I cannot change my mind and bring them back. Already, they are smoke rising from a chimney. Already, they've been converted into somebody else's comfort. People are voted out of existence every day. And every day I cast my careless ballot when I nudge my car into the tangle of traffic, when I eat my lunch from a plastic cup with a foil lid and then throw them in a plastic bag in a bin that will be emptied into a larger bin at the end of the day, and again tomorrow, and remorse is brittle. It splinters under the weight of the next optional inconvenience. I know there is a day coming in the future when I will regret every optional inconvenience I opted out of. The obligatory suffering already felt by so many will arrive at my door with its own key or a crowbar or a curtain of flame. Already it is spidering towards me, a rumor that wished itself true. Already its roots snake under the asphalt, buckling the pavement, ready to tear the whole thing down. This next one is relevant to an event that will happen 2 weeks from yesterday. So if you don't have a plan to vote, please make one. Truisms. A lie, no matter how many times we tell it, is not truth. A lie repeated is a secondhand lie. A lie 1 million people believe is a popular lie. A lie we forget is a delusion. A lie someone powerful wishes were true is a well-funded lie, not a well-founded truth. We can't vote a lie true. We can't overturn the truth. The truth does not require our support to be true. It can hold itself up. It stands tall before us even now, even as we refuse to see it. This next poem is for Meg Stout, and there's snails. If I could get a mushroom in it, I would have, but there's snails, so it's called Dilemma. When I was a girl, snail shells were magical, especially once the snail was gone. No ooze to contend with, those stalked eyes attenuating and retracting inexplicably, just the shell, unfraught by an inhabitant that would have to be evicted before the treasure could be displayed on a shelf. To remove the snail, I'd have to put it where it could not live and wait for it to die, which would make me either a brute or a boy. I did not want to be the former. I was ambivalent about the latter, though it seemed to me their lives were more interesting than mine, or at least the things Boy Scouts did were more interesting than anything we did in Girl Scouts, which seemed like the most concrete way to assess how boys and girls differed. That and violence. From what I could tell, if I were a boy, I wouldn't want a snail shell as a keepsake. I'd just smash it with a rock to see the insides, the hidden parts that manufacture slime. If I were a boy, I'd want to see the muscle of it. But instead, I wanted the pretty part. Back then, I didn't know if there were boy snails and girl snails. I'm not sure I even thought about it. It turns out there aren't, or there are, but they share one body. Back then, I would have found this fact both intriguing and encouraging, since I wanted to collect pretty things, but maybe not be one. I didn't want to have to worry about a hidden part of me that might make a boy want to break me open, or a pretty part that might make a girl want me dead. Also a childhood poem called Traffic. When I was a kid, the dogs ran free, which is why they kept dying. My first heartbreak was a dog that didn't come back. I remember my father handing my mother the empty collar. This is how I learned there are troubles so deep you can't climb out. There are mistakes you only make once and not because you've learned. Still, I could not resist the urge to chase down whatever needed chasing, whatever beckoned from the far side of traffic. So many close calls, strange cars I climbed into that could have turned into a missing child poster, an obituary, my body found in a ditch. Instead, the people who pulled over when I flashed my thumb all wanted the same thing, to save me from whomever might be driving the next car. They delivered me home with a scolding, but otherwise intact, more convinced than ever of my own immortality, more convinced than ever that nothing bad was fast enough to catch me. This next one is Undressing. I need help with the zipper on this skin suit. I can't reach the pull, and all I want is to step out of it and drape it over a chair while I smoke a cigarette or light an orchard on fire. But it's just me here, and knocking on my neighbor's door to ask for a reason to stay in my body seems a little bit forward. I mean, we haven't even exchanged cups of sugar yet or had a blowout fight over who's been hogging the dryer. We've both lived in this building long enough to have raised a child together. If by raised you mean managed to keep it alive long enough to send it to school so someone else could have a go at it. But this is all besides the point. The point is, I have an itch in the middle of my back, right where the zipper would end if I were wearing a strapless gown, which I'm not, but a girl can dream, right? A woman who once was a girl can dream she's still a girl, right? A sweet, intoxicating thing, cherry run through with a plastic sword. But this skin doesn't fit me anymore. This skin was just on loan anyway. This skin will surely look better on whomever is waiting to wear it now. And this next poem is Eggplant. Like the robin's egg hiding its drab bird in a bright blue fist, the eggplant's skin makes a promise it can't keep. Enamel sheen, the shade all purples hope to be when they grow up, the color of a heart beating at the speed of new love. Eggplant, you bush of indigo bloat, fruit smelling, swelling like a corpse, blood blister about to burst. If I could find the thing that tastes the way you look, I would eat nothing else. As it is, I have no idea how to turn you into something my mouth wants to hoard. How often I've been seduced by skin, only to be disappointed by mealy texture and thin flavor, not nearly as sweet as it looked. Probably the problem lies in my cooking, my anemic imagination, my lack of skill with spices. Probably everything I've ever wanted is something I have to learn how to make myself. Probably the blue of the robin's egg is a promise to no one but the bird, curled in the palm of the sky it's about to be born into. And this next poem was written for James Dowd. Poem beginning and ending with a constellation of cells in his brain that turned out to be cancer, not the constellation. This is not how the end begins. It begins long before this, back at the beginning. This is just the first time it appears fully formed on the horizon, like the moon rising or some other celestial being being its celestial self. The horizon changes nothing. It draws a line, and everything on this side is real because we can see it, and everything on the other side is a mystery, even though we all know it's coming. He lived just long enough to plan his own memorial. Who would sing and say what and in what order, which photographs would be displayed on the table in the temple lobby, and then he was gone. And we all sat where he'd planned for us to sit, on this side of the horizon. Later, we stood in the cemetery, our umbrellas preventing the rainwater and the salt water from mixing. From above, we were clusters of black dots surrounding an even blacker hole. And in keeping with the theme of beautiful things that end, this is called Fruitless. Summer has barely begun, and already the grass is baked brown by the heat, a wreath of dried flowers laid on a grave. They're removing names of flowers from the dictionary to make room for words that describe ways to die. Colors are disappearing too. No use for most of the Crayola box when everything is some shade of dust or rot. My kids will never see a polar bear in the wild because I have no kids and the bears have no wild. To be fair, I've never seen a polar bear in the wild either, having never been anywhere polar or even especially wild, but I've seen films of them, lumbering across the ice, searching for seals' breathing holes. We've all got to eat, which is why scorched plants are such a big deal. Dried flowers don't bear fruit. Starved bears don't bear young. Women who are ambivalent about the future don't reproduce, or at least this one doesn't. Gravestones come in 3 colors, none of them interesting. My kids won't pay to have my name and 2 dates carved on a headstone because, again, no kids, and probably in the not far enough away future, no headstones. There's no need to name the dead, whoever or whatever they were, the earth, a barren wasteland, in every language, lost. Before I read my last poem, I want to thank a few more people. People always talk about the solitary life of a writer, but my experience has been the exact opposite. And Martha, when you're talking about your friendship with Lee, that this makes me think of that. Like there are no friends like the friends you make writing. And poetry has always provided my deepest connections. My writing communities have held me when I needed to be held and pushed me when I needed to be pushed. I'm grateful to each of the individuals who make up these communities, and there's way too many of you to name here. So these are the places that we met and wrote together. The New England Young Writers Conference at Breadloaf, where I went as a student and then chaperoned for years. The Wednesday night reading at Cantab Lounge in Cambridge, which got me through grad school. Both Port Veritas and Word Portland here in Portland have been really important homes to me. Maine Publishers and Writers Alliance actually hosted the first open mic I read on, like redacted years ago when I first moved to Portland. And also the Warren Wilson community. And a special thanks to my faculty advisors there. I actually, since completing the chapbook, I've now graduated, and my advisors helped shape many of the poems that were in this collection. So Martha Rhodes, Alan Shapiro, Karen Brennan, and Matthew Olsman, thank you. And of course, to my poetry coven, Sonia Johansson, Anna Silverstein, Jen Onken, Nicole Chevital, Meg Stout, Amy Bergen, and Maureen Thorson, who is right over there. Hi, Maureen. So the last poem I'm going to read does what a lot of poems and people do as they age, which is to absolutely refuse to fit into their clothing. There's an earlier, like smaller version of this in the chapbook. Thaw. The fern unrolls its delicate scroll, whispering green into the breeze's ear. The lily of the valley lowers its face modestly, and the pussy willows lift their tiny feet and paw the air. Everything teeters on the edge of ripening. Soon, summer's breath will be a lagoon, a sweaty palm clamped on the back of my neck. Cattails will raise their tight fists of fiber overhead in defiance. And I'll put on a sundress and ride my bike to the park and not care if the wind flips up my hem or who sees. I'll lounge on a blanket and gorge myself on strawberries. But for now, spring is only half out of her clothes, slowly rolling a stocking down her leg. Thank you.
Thank you, Zan. That was lovely. Wow. Yeah, Thank you so much. So I'm gonna bring all of our readers back here. Let's see, Adrian. There we go. Look at that. We have time for a few questions. And I know we have a few, other than Zan, lots of people in the comments saying, amazing, great job, awesome poems. Some really nice comments coming through there. But I thought there was a great question that was also a version of something I was gonna ask, from Elizabeth Rosenzweig, who writes, the imagery in your poems is so clear and crisp and inspiring. Where do you get your inspiration?
Whew. Wow, I wish I knew the answer to that question, because then I could actually find it right now. I know a lot of my writer friends like me are having a hard time finding words in what we're experiencing right now. But you know, the world's a pretty great inspiration. So yeah, just observing what's out there and trying to put it on a page. But yeah, if anyone finds the answer to that, I would love to hear it.
Martha, Adrian, do you have any ways that you've been finding to stay with your writing during the pandemic, or to get through these last months? Anything you want to offer to folks out there?
It's really hard. I mean, it really, because it's just like, what's there to say? The world's going to end and we're all doomed. But I think that my favorite quote about poetry is Auden, who said that poetry just may be defined as the clear expression of mixed feelings. And so I really like to work in contradiction. And so if you can get unlike things together, you know, so little daffodils with their heads cut off and stuff like that, I think that expresses the Gothic pretty well. I think we're in a terribly Gothic time, and you know, so put unlike things together would be my teacherly response to that. I'm going to mute now.
I haven't actually written a great deal during the pandemic, though I've done poetry-like things. And I think for me, I don't, especially when things are very, very difficult. The poems I wrote to my husband were kind of an exception because I didn't think they were going out into the world, but often it takes me a while. And I think I'm in a period where I'm just sort of taking things in and letting them churn in my head. I know there's poetry going on, but it hasn't gotten to a page yet. And I think one thing I have learned is just to relax when I'm in that state. It's part of writing. I don't even believe in writer's block. I just believe that it's a process that sometimes involves more listening than actually writing or speaking.
Yeah, Martha, I was just thinking of that the other day, because I was remembering that when I was, when I was first starting out, when I would personally get in a spot where I wasn't writing, I would kind of freak out, you know, like, oh, this is the end, I'm never going to write again. And I think as I've gotten older, I know that has lessened. It's like, okay, you know, this is just what needs to happen right now. Yeah, I'm going to read, I'm going to take notes, I'm going to try to pay attention. But I was also, yeah, Adrian, you want to?
I just want to agree with that. Yeah, it's just like, don't feel bad. Wait, amazing things are happening even if you're not writing and you're just paying attention. There's no doubt that that's true. Yeah.
Zan, I think you're either just finished your MFA or or just about to, yes. So I was wondering about that. And also you had written a lot and taught before that, right? And had, you know, so I'm wondering, I imagine there are people out there who might like to hear from you about how you think about yourself as a poet now versus, you know, even just a few years ago, having gone through, you know, that intense experience of doing an MFA.
Yeah, the community aspect of poetry has, like, each community has delivered me to my next community in a way that I don't even have words for. Like, it's It's been amazing. And I went to the New England Young Writers Conference when I was 17, and that was the first time I'd been amongst a community of writers. And I was like, oh, these are my people. And, I've been able to keep going over the years, bringing my own students there. And it was actually at the Young Writers Conference that I asked Karen McHadden, an amazing poet who does a workshop for the chaperones, like, so suddenly I'm interested. I'd never been interested in an MFA, but then I was like, I want the next community. Like, I'd done the slam thing. I did the slam circuit for like 5 years, which was terrific. But we stopped having a slam in Portland, and I felt like I was ready for the next community. And I asked her, and she was like, well, Warren Wilson is an amazing community of people who support each other and continuing to write long past graduation. And that's been, my experience. And I also have an incredible community of writers here in Portland that we, before the pandemic, were getting together every Thursday night and writing, and that was like my holiday day of the week. But for me, it's always been about finding the next community that is gonna nurture me both as a poet and as a person. I feel like I've learned so much as a person and how to be a better person from my poetry communities.
Adrian and Martha, I was wondering, as we had this, because of Lee's passing and this chapbook, there's this looking back, looking forward thing tonight. And I was wondering for each of you, what things you wish you had known when you were starting out as a young poet. What were things that you want to tell that young poet?
I'll go. That it's a long journey, and not to, like, I love, Zane, I loved what you said about like the community stuff. There's something about writing that keeps you alone with yourself. I mean, you have to be alone with yourself in order to hear yourself to write poems. And so it really is isolating. And I had a bunch of kids, and so I was always really busy, but I was alone with myself an awful lot. And I too, I remember when I first came to Maine, it was like 16 years ago. I couldn't believe how warm the community was. Like, everybody was so welcoming. And yeah, you, like, poetically, I loved what you said about the slam community stuff. You let yourself change. And so I think that's maybe the hardest thing. I think we do end up writing the same poem. I know I do. The same poem over and over and over and over again. I've written 100,000 copies of the same poem, sometimes. And to be willing to let the world change you, and to be quiet and listen to it, and not be anxious about it, and to lay fallow, what Martha said too, and what you guys have said about just being willing to listen and not speak and hear. Sorry about that, my clock, is really important too. And to be willing to be a different person on the other side of every poem, because I think the poems are here to change us, maybe. Okay, mute.
I started out as kind of a closet poet. I was a closet poet for a long time. I didn't show anybody my poems. At some point I realized it was because I didn't want my parents to see them. And I finally got over that, but I'm kind of glad for that writing in isolation, for having my conversation be, as I think it for me always is, between me and the poem, me and the page. I really don't think about an audience when I'm writing. I think about the words that are talking back to me. But then I found a community, and my communities have shifted and varied a lot over the years, as my poetry has. I was thinking about Lee today. I have gone through Lee Sharkey's manuscripts going way back when, and it's so interesting to look at the evolution of somebody else when you don't know the early work. And one other thing I would say to you, Suzanne, Lee was a Warren Wilson graduate. And one of the communities she kept until the end of her life was her Warren Wilson communities. She went on a retreat treat, I think as recently as a couple years ago. There were gatherings in Cambridge. She would come and stay with me. And so I kind of from the outside got a glimpse of that community, and you're not going to lose it, I'll tell you.
That's great. I think we are just about out of time. I want to thank our readers, and I want to congratulate Zan again on this wonderful chapbook of poems, and thank Martha for choosing it and Adrian for blurbing it. And we've been talking for a few years now about restarting the Maine Chapbook Series, which went for a good 15 years back in the day. And this is a wonderful book to kick it off with. We're really excited about it. So thanks, everybody. And Dan, I don't know if there's anything you want to say to take us out, or are you good?
I just want to say thank you for supporting poetry, and it's really exciting to see that I have like both my favorite English teacher here from when I was a student and some of my favorite students here. So that's, that makes me happy.
Cool. And I just want to, as we go out here, I would like to invite anybody who wants to unmute themselves, and let's give a little a little audience cheer. How about it? Come on.
Buy her book.
I made a GIF and put a link in chat, so at the beginning.
Hi, Betsy.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Gabe. I love your
Again.
poems. All of you read so beautifully.
Thank
Very
you, everybody,
moving.
for coming tonight. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Gibson. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you all.
Everybody.
Bye. Congratulations again.